We're going to move on down beyond Stratford High School. We're going to take a look across the state. And this question is for Dr. Smith. And I'm just going to say Connie. Over the last 5 years, the State Department of Education has made a concerted effort to identify struggling schools and to work with them to help them move off of the low-performing, and we call it high-priority list, by working together. What have you discovered about this process or throughout this process of identifying and supporting schools to move from the high-priority list to the good standing list?
Good morning. In our work with the high priority schools over the years, our research has shown 4 or 5 areas around which, if you get a focus or a clarity of purpose, will ensure your success. We've discovered if you get a focus around the curriculum or the content, standards-based, aligned to the assessment, in addition to a focus and a clarity around instructional delivery for different types of learners. Additionally, we do a lot of testing in Tennessee. It's how you use the test results that make the difference in this state. And we see it as our responsibility in the Department of Education to help teachers in particular and administrators get their arms around the data so that they can develop prioritized goals in their school improvement plans. So you must get a focus around the use of assessment results for improvement. I've heard it said that you can have an effective school without an effective principal. We don't believe that. Our research has shown that not to be true. So you must have someone there who cares about kids and is an instructional leader. And those 4 or 5 areas, in addition to the organization of a school day. A lot of research that we have ensures that time on task is so critical to moving a school off the list. And what we've recommended in this state, particularly at the middle school level, is that you have at least 90 minutes of reading, language arts, vocabulary, and spelling every day to close the gap, in particular for students with disabilities, ELL students, and students of poverty. We also recommend 60 minutes every day of mathematics, pre-algebraic, fractions, decimals, operations, and percentages. And that will move the students and help us close the huge gaps that we have. So in essence, you put all those together and you have a formula for success based on our actually about 7 years of data.
So as you look from year to year at your schools, what kind of things tell you that schools are moving in the right direction?
We, of course, always monitor the meeting the federal benchmarks. And we look at how faculties, in particular teachers we know, are the single most important variable in student progress, improving student performance. Research says that, we know that. So we watch to see how teachers use the data formatively as well as summatively, year to year, and we really don't do this annually anymore. We look at weekly, 4 weeks, and 6 weeks progress. We look to see if the framework or the focus for the school is based on the needs of all students. And we want to look for an awareness and a perception to learning styles of all students. Another area is we look to see if there is a collaborative professional learning, small learning community involved in this. And it's like you've heard earlier, it's just a natural sort of thing. Common planning period is essential in everything that we do.
Thank you. And Steve, you've heard what Dr. Smith has said about teachers working together. You're currently directing the teacher exemplary educator program for Tennessee, and you've trained over 150 retired teachers to go into schools and to work with school and school leadership. Tell us what are some of the strategies that your exemplary educators are using to bring about change.
Thank you, Gwen. If Dr. Smith and I sound a lot alike, it's because for the last 7 years we've been joined at the hip and we have a lot of common experiences with this kind of work. First of all, I would say that school improvement is complex and it's dynamic. There is no one thing or no set of things that would work for all schools. And knowing that, we found that there are a few things that really make a difference in these high priority schools. And what makes that even better is that it's consistent with what research says. And I'll highlight a couple of those for you. One is the use of data. Almost in every arena these days around educational improvement, school improvement, you hear about use of data. Well, we still walk into schools where data is not used appropriately. And data may be limited to the one-time test that's given in the spring. Data must be used formatively, it must be used summatively. So we work a lot with teachers and with principal leadership to help the entire school staff understand what kinds of data they need to look at, that it's a consistent, ongoing look at their data, that they must aggregate it, disaggregate it, and do these things over and over again to have a great sense of what's happening, not only holistically in the school, but in each classroom. The other thing that we do a lot of is try to develop staff accountability. We still find that in schools there are pockets of isolation where there are teachers and there are even administrative situations where not everyone owns what's happening with the students in that school. That's difficult because we work in an environment where it's easy to go into our classrooms and shut the door and these are my kids for this hour or for this day. But helping schools to establish the sense of all of these kids are our responsibility, and together we have to work collectively to improve our practice, to ensure that students are getting exactly what they need according to standards, and bring the parents in, because we can't do it without the parents being part of the team. Now, we can't do either one of those two things unless we have collaboration. You can't do that individually. We have to collaborate to make sure data is being used and there is accountability and ownership for student achievement. The last thing I'd say about that, Gwen, is recently one of the exemplary educators said to me, Steve, the sense of urgency must be greater than the resistance to change. And that is that's very profound. And I would say that we spend a lot of our time in schools helping school staff, school community on the broad, develop a we can and we want to attitude.
Steve, I think you just peeped over into my mind, because my next question was, as an exemplary educator go into a school and they meet resistance with teachers working collaboratively, how does that EE move the teachers along that continuum from working in isolation, feeling totally responsible and accountable for just their group of students, to working with their teammates, with their school, with their professional colleagues, to ensure that every student in the school is successful? Can you talk a little bit about some strategies that your EEs use to help move the personnel from isolation to collaboration?
Sure. One of the things that we spend a lot of time of, and I would say this is pretty much overarching, you could put a lot of strategies under this one area, and that is focusing on results, bringing focus to everything that's happening in the school. Tennessee has a mechanism for bringing focus. It's called their School Improvement Plan, the Tennessee School Improvement Planning process, where collectively and collaboratively the school community comes together to develop goals and action steps around which their intent is to move the school from where they are to where they need to be. And we find that in a lot of places, they're very good about developing plans. They can really put good plans together. The problem sometimes is focusing on what is the end result, and are we getting what we were expecting? And if we're not, what are we doing about that?